Starting off the week, we had the 34th launch of Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket. Liftoff took place on August 3rd at 12:42 UTC from Blue's Launch Site 1 in West Texas. The flight carried 6 passengers on board to the edge of space and back. By the way, Blue Origin keeps calling them astronauts, and there's this whole debate about whether you should say astronauts or just passengers. For the time being, we are just going to keep using passengers since it's a more general term. But feel free to discuss that in the comments. The 6 passengers were RV Bahal, Gökhan Erdem, Deborah Martorell, Lionel Pitchford, J.D. Russell, and H.E. Justin Sun. Justin Sun was the passenger who, in 2021, had bid $28 million to be New Shepard's first paying passenger, but he wasn't able to commit to the eventual launch, which was planned for just about a month later. It seems like he might have had a rather busy schedule if it wasn't until now, in 2025, that he had enough time to be able to go to space. For this mission, Blue Origin flew Tail 4 as the booster, which performed its 15th launch and landing on this flight. The New Shepard capsule on this flight was also the RSS First Step capsule, completing its 14th launch and landing. And by the way, that's the same one that was used for the first passenger flight on New Shepard back in 2021, so I guess Justin Sun still ended up flying on that capsule anyways. Now we go from suborbital launches to orbital launches, and we've had a few this week, starting from Florida with SpaceX's Falcon 9. Liftoff took place on August 4th at 7:57 UTC from Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. The mission was carrying 28 Starlink V2 mini satellites into low Earth orbit. With this mission, SpaceX has now launched a total of 9,342 Starlink satellites into orbit, of which 1,221 have re-entered and 7,042 have moved into their operational orbit. The booster used on this mission, B-1080, was flying for a 21st time, and it successfully landed on SpaceX's drone ship Just Read the Instructions. From China, we had yet another launch of internet satellites on board a Chang Zheng 12 rocket. Liftoff happened on August 4th at 10:21 UTC from Launch Complex 2 at the commercial Wenchang space launch site located on the island of Hainan in China. The rocket was carrying a batch of 9 Guowang satellites into low Earth orbit, the 7th operational batch of these satellites to be deployed in orbit. With this launch, China has now launched a total of 57 of these operational satellites into orbit, as well as about a couple dozen test satellites. This was also the second flight of the Chang Zheng 12 rocket, having had its debut flight back in November of last year. From China, we go to New Zealand and Rocket Lab's Electron rocket on the mission called the Harvest Goddess Thrives. Electron took off on August 5th at 4:10 UTC from Launch Complex 1B, carrying the QPS SAR-12 satellite for Japanese company iQPS. The QPS SAR satellites are small Earth observation satellites that use a small deployable antenna to perform synthetic aperture radar imaging of Earth. This was Electron's 11th launch of the year and 69th overall. Right at the end of the week, we had the launch of a Zhelong 3 taking off from the Dongfang-Heng Tiangong launch platform off the coast of China. The rocket was carrying the 4th batch of Geely satellites into low Earth orbit. The Geely satellites are part of the Geely constellation of satellites developed by G-Space, a subsidiary of the Chinese automotive company Geely. These satellites are used by Geely as navigation augmentation satellites that connect to their own vehicles on the ground, providing more accurate positioning than with just the traditional Global Navigation Positioning System satellites. Going into next week, or maybe it's already happened, is the return of SpaceX's Crew 10 from the International Space Station. The return was supposed to have happened earlier in the week, but bad weather kept pushing the departure by a few days. As of recording, the undocking of Crew 10 was supposed to happen on August 8th at 22:05 UTC, so it may have already undocked by the time you're watching this, unless the weather has delayed it again. We'll definitely cover it in more detail next week once it happens. Now that's of course a crew return, but we've got lots of other launches next week as usual. There's a handful of Starlink launches scheduled, which are also split almost half and half between Florida and California in terms of where they're launching from. But also next week, we've got the 3rd launch of ULA's Vulcan rocket with the USSF-106 mission. That mission should hopefully be the first national security mission on Vulcan after a long delay in getting its certification, somewhat expected given the oopsies that they had with the SRB nozzle on Vulcan's second flight. Now if all goes well and there aren't any more delays, that launch should occur no earlier than August 12th at 23:49 UTC. Less than an hour later, we'll also have the 3rd launch of another rocket, this time of Ariane 6 in its 2 SRB configuration from French Guiana. That launch will be carrying the METOP SGA-1 weather satellite for Europe. The satellite's part of the 2nd generation meteorological operational satellite developed by the European Space Agency. It was originally supposed to launch on a Soyuz rocket, but after the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, ESA decided to move it to the Ariane 6.